Circle of Life in Jesus' Name, Part 2, Chapter 13. It's September 17th, Tuesday morning, Stewart Ranch, Pine Forest, Georgia. Lena Stewart Apple smiled as the cool September morning air hit her face. She pulled back on the reins and brought Santana to a halt at the back fence where she and Jake would build a home, and also where she would build a stable for horses. Horses she would train, horses she would raise and sell, horses she would use to take the inn's patrons on trail rides, and also to practice some equine therapy. Eventually, she would build an arena with seating to have horse shows. And she also wanted to figure out a way to incorporate her riding and shooting skills together and teach others the same thing. She climbed over the fence, realizing it was the same place that Brett had pulled her over and tried to take her. Jake had intervened. She sighed. Jake. She loved him with a powerful love, and she missed him so much. It could be 6 months or longer before he came home, so she knew she had to focus on her present life. And she would. It hurt too much to do otherwise. She walked the path that she and Jake had tied off through the trees, branching off from the path that would lead to their home. She turned and followed the second path that would eventually lead to her own stables. This land currently belonged to her parents, but she and Jake would eventually buy it and make it their own. The land was wooded, and parts of it would have to be cleared, but they would leave as much of the natural surroundings as possible. One thing they would do, though, was cut a drive onto their portion of the property from the state road behind it so that they wouldn't have to drive through the ranch every time they came and went. She took a few pictures with her phone, got a few ideas in her head, and headed back to Santana, waiting patiently for her at the fence. She rode him at a fast pace across the meadow and headed to her father's stables. Dismounting, she took the next hour to feed and water and brush the scheduled horses, and then headed into her parents' home to have breakfast. "Hey, Mom," Lena greeted brightly. She came in the kitchen door. "Hey, sweetheart, how you doing, baby?" Lena knew her mother really wanted to know if she was pining away for her husband. She smiled. "I'm dealing with it. It might take me a while to get used to it. I rode Santana this morning. He might miss his daddy more than me." Lisa Stewart laughed. "I doubt that." "What's for breakfast?" "Well, I'm making cheese eggs with onions and mushrooms and biscuits and ham." "Wow, that sounds delicious. What's the special occasion?" Lisa smiled. "Comfort food for my baby girl." Lena giggled. I wonder how long I can milk this." "Well, now that you said that, not long at all." Chaz came through the door with a big smile. "Hey, Bugs, how you doing, honey?" "Doing fine," she assured him as he kissed her cheek in passing. "Good. I've been out running fences and teaching a new hand, and I'm in a hurry." He went through the kitchen and to the base of the stairs. "Charlie, Matt, Erilyn," he yelled. "You need to be down here dressed and ready for school in 5 minutes. Move it." He then turned and went down the hall to the office. Lena smiled as she heard the stomping of feet as her siblings scurried to do her father's bidding. Charlie was the first to appear. "Bugs, hey." "Hey, Squirt," she said. He kissed his big sister's cheek and went straight to his mom and did the same. "You need help, Mom?" "Yep." Grabbed that plate of eggs and that basket of biscuits and set them on the table. Matt and Erilyn came down then, kissed and hugged Lena, kissed their mother's cheek, and sat just as Chaz came in. He waited for Lisa to take her seat and then called on Matt to say the blessing, and then they all dug in. Mom, this is so good," Lena said. "You know you're going to have to help me get better at cooking before Jake gets back. I'd like to surprise him by cooking something good like this for him." "Well, I'll be happy to teach you, honey. After all, I had the best teacher in the world." "Miss Maddie?" "Of course. I sure do miss her." "Me too," Charlie said. Lena nodded. "Isn't it cool, though, that Gabe spoke to her?" "Very cool," Lisa said softly. "Kids, eat up. We leave for school in 15 minutes. Lena smiled. Oh, how she loved her family. Just the normal talk, the normal clicking of the forks against plates, the little barbs issued between her brothers. Family was where it's at. Breakfast was over and everyone cleared their plates as Lisa started cleaning the kitchen, but Lisa suddenly stopped and put her hand to her abdomen, lifting up on her very swollen belly. "Honey, you okay?" Chaz asked. She nodded. "Yeah, I think it's just a hard kick." "Ooh, let me feel," Erilyn said. She ran and put her hand on her mother's abdomen. "Right There, Lisa said breathlessly as she repositioned her daughter's hand. Wow, I felt it, Erilyn exclaimed. Chaz smiled and came up to nuzzle on his wife's cheek. Lisa stiffened and grabbed her belly again. He's being rough, huh? Lisa smiled. How do you know it's the boy? Just a hunch, he chuckled, but stopped when Lisa jerked. Ow, she said, gripping her abdomen. Oh, Chaz, she said, breathing hard. What is it, baby? She was panting. I don't know. Oh, it hurts. Oh, no, Chaz, something's wrong. I'm going to get you to the hospital. That might be a good idea, she said as tears came to her eyes. Oh, sweetheart, don't cry. It's going to be all right. He looked at his kids, all wide-eyed. Lena? She nodded. I got this. You go. Okay, and tell Dad, and call John, and Lizzie will want to know. He called over his shoulder as he supported Lisa and rushed her out to the car. Lena looked around at her siblings. Hey, guys, she's going to be okay. I'm sure Dad will call us in a little while and let us know how she's doing. But what's wrong with her? Erilyn asked, her little mouth quivering. Well, probably the babies are trying to be born early. Well, what happens to them if they're born early? Charlie asked. Well, they may have a hard time and have to stay in the hospital, but the doctors can make it so they stop trying to come early. So let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's wait to hear from Dad. Charlie nodded. So, Lena continued, you guys don't have to go to school if you don't want to. I understand. I want to go, Erilyn said. Lena smiled. Of course you do. She looked at her younger brother. Matt? He shook his head. Charlie? He shook his head. Okay, let me run Erilyn to school and I'll be right back. You guys stay here unless you want to ride along. We'll stay. Good. And call Granddaddy Charles and Granddaddy Joe for me, and I'll call the Apples while I'm on my way to the school. Thanks, Charlie. Her 14-year-old brother nodded solemnly. New scene. It'd been 3 hours since Chaz had left the house with Lisa. Charlie and Matt were up in their room, and Lena went up to check on them. She peeked in the door, and what she saw touched her to the core. They were kneeling, praying together. She silently closed the door and went back down the stairs. Her grandparents on her mother's side were in the kitchen. Shirley was doing up the breakfast dishes that Lena hadn't yet gotten to. I'm sorry, I meant to do those earlier, Lena said. Don't you worry about it, sweetie. I needed something to do. Are you okay? Lena nodded. She just wanted to talk to her husband and pray with him and have him tell her everything was going to be okay, because when Jake said it, she believed it. If only her dad would call. The moment she had the thought, her phone buzzed and she answered immediately. Dad? Hey, hon, everything is okay. Sorry it took so long, but we had to wait on a specialist. But everything is going to be okay. Your mom is fine. The babies are fine. Are they born? No. Your mom went into premature labor. Her body's worn out, but they put her on some medicine and prescribed bed rest, and they think she can go another couple of months. Good, because if they'd been born, they wouldn't make it, would they? Well, odds would be against them, but I don't ever doubt that God can work miracles anymore, not since Eric's and Gabe's experience. Still, if she can hold on, it will be much better. Will she have to stay in the hospital for 2 months? No, she'll come home, but she'll have to stay in bed. No going up and down the stairs, no housework. She can sit up in a chair for a few hours a day, and we can help her with some movement therapy. She's not due until the end of December, but they want her to hold on at least until the beginning of November. That would put her at 32 weeks. I'll move back in, Dad. I'll take care of her. I'll take care of everything. Well, you won't have to take care of everything, but I will definitely need you if I'm going to take care of the ranch, too. Whatever you need, I'll take care of it and more. I'm just so grateful that Mom's going to be okay, and the boys have been upstairs praying. I'm going to add my prayers to theirs. Thank you, Jesus. Indeed. New scene. September 17th, still Tuesday afternoon, Newport High School, Newport Beach, California. Jordan almost couldn't contain herself as she walked toward the school. The game today wasn't at Brookside, but at Newport High School, a neighboring school, making it a rival. Jordan had borrowed a cute orange and white shirt from Jackie in an attempt to wear Taylor's school colors. She looked up to see Three holding the door open for her, and she smiled at him. It was always such an overwhelming pleasure to see him again. He had a power about him, an aura of light, maybe, something that drew her to him like a magnet. But she wondered if Jackie was right. even though Jackie, in her very rude way, was just speaking out of envy, and she couldn't blame her for that. She may actually have a few good points. Hey, Three. He smiled. Hey, Jordan. He hugged her hard. So good to see you. I missed you. I missed you too, though it's only been 32 hours since I last saw you on Monday morning, but who's counting? He laughed. I am. But I always am. Did Agent Trout follow you? Yes. Young Eric pulled out his phone and called him. Trout. Hey, this is Eric. Yes, I know. Are you okay? He smiled. Yes. I was wondering if you'd like to come in and see the game with us. Well, I'd love to, as long as you don't feel like I'm intruding. You're kidding, right? Just saying. Ameritech is part of our family, all 40,000 of you. Agent Trout laughed. That's a big family. Yes, it is. Be right in. Jordan smiled up at him. That was sweet. He laughed. Yep, that's me. I'm just sweet. He gently touched her cheek. Are you feeling better since Sunday? He asked as he bought her and Agent Trout's tickets. She nodded. Yes, calmer, safer, and I'm glad that I fell apart on Sunday. Why? Because you came to the apartment and slept on the couch with me. He smiled and nodded. Well, though I'm not supposed to wish you any discomfort, I agree. I'm glad you fell apart too. Because sleeping with you in my arms is something I'll never forget. Her heart leapt. Agent Trout joined them, and Three opened the gym door for her and pointed to where his family was sitting, though in Jordan's opinion they were pretty easy to spot. Again, everyone stood, hugged, and greeted her as if she were an important part of their family. Grandmaster Keno took her hand and looked into her eyes. After the game, let's go for a walk. She nodded. Yes, sir. She wanted to get out of it, but she promised she would let him help her, and she saw no polite way out. Jordan took a minute to shake hands with each little Keno and then sat down with Jeffy on one side and Three on the other. Agent Trout shook hands with everyone and sat on the other side of young Eric. The game was about to start, and Jordan stood, whistled, and yelled, Go Tigers! Young Eric grinned. He was definitely falling for this girl. As the game went on, he didn't know if he was enjoying the game as much as he was enjoying watching Jordan cheer for his sister, heart and soul. Brookside lost the first set, won the second set, and struggled to win the tiebreaker, but finally pulled it out. Taylor was a big part of that win because of her quickness and her powerful serve. Jordan jumped for joy when they won and turned to Three. I am so proud of Taylor. What an athlete. He smiled. Everything she said, everything she did was perfect. Taylor came running over and hugged everyone. Dad, I don't have to go back on the bus if you'll come let the coach know I'm with you. Ricky nodded. On my way. Jordan grabbed Taylor and complimented her on her play, and Taylor hugged her a second time. Grandmaster Keno rose and stepped down to the floor and waited for Jordan to join him, and she nodded at Three. I guess that's my cue. He doesn't bite. Stop worrying. She nodded and walked out the door with Grandmaster Keno. Agent Trout followed behind at a discreet distance. Taylor and young Eric watched them go. I just love her, Taylor said brightly. Eric nodded. I think I do too, he said softly. He looked down at his sister. But don't go blabbing that around. She giggled. Who? Me? Of course not. Outside, Jordan and Grandmaster Keno walked slowly, side by side. What are your thoughts about young Eric? He asked her. Her mouth opened in surprise. I thought we were going to talk about my stepfather and like what happened when I was 14. He smiled kindly and nodded at her. We are talking about that. That event in your life colors everything you do, every relationship you have, every deep feeling you feel. Oh, okay. So what do you think about young Eric? I think he's wonderful. I think he's too good to be true. Grandmaster Keno nodded. Good, that's an honest answer. What makes him too good to be true? I mean, he's kind, he's smart, he's very good looking, he's honorable, he's like the perfect guy. So why is all that too good to be true? Which means, if I were to rephrase what you said, you think it's unbelievable. She blew out a breath. Well, I don't mean to insult him at all. I do believe he is what he is. I guess I just don't believe that someone as wonderful as him could be interested in me. And there we have it. She sighed. So you don't feel worthy of his attention? She stopped and looked up into his kind face and blinked. I guess not, she said softly. What do you think makes you unworthy? If you're thinking that I think I'm not worthy because of what my stepfather did to me when I was just a kid, then you're wrong, and I mean no disrespect when I say that. What made your stepfather think he could even get away with what he tried to do to you? I'm not sure what you're trying to say. It was nothing I did that made him think it was okay. I fought. I fought hard. But I was a kid, and he was a big, strong man, and I fought so hard with every ounce of strength that I had. Your stepfather didn't work and support your family like a man should, did he? No. Your whole family struggled financially because he didn't even try to support you, didn't they? Yes. And your sweet mother's worn herself out trying to make ends meet, hasn't she? Yes. Which of those things makes you unworthy? None of them, she said forcefully. It makes me more worthy because I've struggled. I've worked hard. I've tried to make something of myself so that I'll be able to help my whole family. So I'm completely worthy. Grandmaster Keno stopped and smiled. That's correct, Jordan. She looked up at him. Tears welled in her eyes, and he reached out and pulled her into a hug. It's okay to cry. It's cleansing for the mind, body, and spirit, he said softly. There now, sweet girl. Listen to me, he said, as he patted her back, and she cried against his chest. I am so proud of you, Jordan, for your strength, for your persistence, for not giving up, for not giving in, for keeping your head held high. You have nothing to be ashamed of. He tried to touch your body, but you didn't let him touch your mind. Yes, he was stronger than you, but his mind was weak. Your mind was and is powerful. You are a special young lady, and I'm proud to know you. And I know young Eric feels the same way. She pulled away. Really? Yes, really. He's probably afraid to tell you how he feels because of his own insecurities. You know, us guys do that kind of thing. We find it hard to be vulnerable enough to share our feelings, but we eventually do. Be patient. He took her by her arms and set her back from him. You feeling okay? She nodded. I feel surprisingly good. He smiled. Let's head back. I'm sure everyone is hungry. Thank you, Grandmaster Keno. Thank you, Jordan. Thanks for trusting me. We'll talk again on Friday. She nodded. I look forward to it. They turned and headed back to where everyone stood by the cars waiting. Well, not everyone. Ricky, Bree, Taylor, Jeffy, and Cam had gone on ahead to the restaurant. Young Eric looked into Jordan's eyes as she neared. She'd been crying. He could tell that. He reached out and touched some moisture under her eye. Were those good tears or hard ones? She sighed. Both, I guess. Your grandfather said they were good for my soul. Young Eric nodded. Are you hungry? She smiled, glad he didn't want to ask about what was said. I'm starved. Well, we're going to a different restaurant tonight. Grandma wanted to change. Oh, you sounded disappointed. Well, I really liked Casa Latina. I guess you'll like this one too. It's a Southern-style place. Southern as in Southern Cali or Southern U.S.? U.S. My mother and grandmother and uncles grew up in Georgia. Really? You know, I thought I heard a slight Southern accent from your grandmother and a very strong one from Mrs. Lee. Is she like an old friend of your grandma from Georgia? He laughed, more like an old enemy, which is a long story, but Aunt Angel is from Alabama. She never lost her accent. I think it's cute. I do too. I think Uncle Jason really likes it too. Anyway, want to ride with me? It's not far and I'll bring you back to your car. Sure. He opened the car door and ushered her into the car. He sighed as they pulled out of the school parking lot. There was such a pleasant feeling whenever they were alone together. He glanced over at her, and she smiled up at him. So, I'm a little surprised you guys would frequent a Southern-style restaurant. Well, it's not authentic. It's a healthy version. Like, they have fried chicken, but it's not really fried. It's coated with almond flour and baked in a convection oven. The spices they use make it really tasty, and the chickens are free range, organically raised, The mashed potatoes and other veggies like collard greens, turnip greens, corn, butter beans, green beans, they're all organically grown, non-GMO, and like the butter used to flavor them is made locally from a raw milk dairy. No hormones, no antibiotics. It's really healthy food. Well, it sounds good, but like, what's a butter bean? He chuckled. I asked the same thing. They're actually lima beans, but when allowed to mature, they lose their green tint and they turn a creamy color. I think that's why they call them butter beans in the South, but really, they're just lima beans. Interesting. I've grown up in Southern Cal and never been anywhere else. I'm used to Cal-Mex kind of food, especially since my stepfather was from Brazil. So we ate a lot of Latina type food. Eric nodded. You've really never been anywhere else in the country? Nope, the farthest I've gone is Mount Shasta. Well then, maybe the next time we go visit Georgia, you could come along. She frowned. You don't want to? Oh, it's not that. I'm just thinking how I could work that out. But it would be fun to see other parts of the country. Where rural Georgia is very different from Cali, but very cool. I love it there. My parents are going to buy a second home there in Pine Forest, where the Tanners and Apples and Stewarts live. Really? They must really like it there too. So how is it so different? Well, first, it's very green. Everything is so green. There are trees everywhere. When you fly in, you almost can't see Atlanta because there are so many trees. Then you drive along the interstate to head south to Pine Forest, and it's just woods and large swaths of green median, sometimes with wildflowers growing rampant. It's more like Northern California, except no mountains. Well, actually, there are the Appalachians when you get up into the northern Georgia. It's really a beautiful state, just no desert. Trees, flowers, grass, lots of rivers and lakes, and the air is humid, kind of heavy. And they have these thunderstorms that make you feel like it's the end of the world. Oh, and sometimes they're accompanied by tornadoes, or from what I've seen, most of the time. I'm not sure if I want to go there or not. He laughed. I guess I'm not painting a very good picture of it. You'll have to come with me. We could go all over the state and see all the things that make it so charming. Go north to the mountains, go south to the Okefenokee Swamp, and hit up Savannah on the coast. That sounds like fun. Let's make it happen. She nodded. I'd like that. They pulled up to the restaurant. Jordan looked at the sign and read aloud, All the Fixins. She giggled. That's a cute name. Eric smiled as he rounded the car, but Jordan beat him to opening the car door, so she offered her hand and he pulled her out. Just like before, the restaurant owner greeted them and sent them back to their regular spot in the rear of the place at a giant table. As they found their seat, Jordan noticed that little Manny was crying, and Grandmaster Keno lifted him from the booster seat and carried him out. Young Eric stood back up. Granddad, would you like me to take him? Eric smiled. Thanks, but I haven't. The two of us are going to have a little talk. Uh-oh, young Eric said, winking at Manny, who suddenly quieted and laid his head on his father's shoulder. The sight was heartwarming. This child didn't know it yet, but he'd gotten very lucky to have been found and brought home to be fathered by Eric Keno. A strong, loving, and gentle man. There may be some rough times ahead as the children get settled into their new home and get used to being loved and cared for by a new mother and father whom they were not used to having around. Young Eric thought it would be very interesting to see those children in a year or two and note the changes and watch them bloom to their full potential. Two servers came and took everyone's order. The family, as usual, chatted about Taylor's game and other family news. Eric came back inside, holding Manny's hand. The child was smiling and calm. Eric lifted him into his chair, touched his nose, kissed his cheek, and patted his head. Shelley smiled up at her husband and closed her eyes. Are you sleepy, Mom? Jeffy asked. She opened her eyes. No, I'm just thanking God again that your father's here with us to help me raise these little monsters. We're not monsters, Noah argued. We're munchkins. Everyone laughed. We're not munchkins either, Angelina argued. We're angels from heaven. Mommy says so. Mommy said we're monsters, Abraham said. I was just teasing you, Shelley said. You're all my little angels, and I love you so much I could just eat you up. You can eat me up, Manny said, offering his arm. Shelley took it and pretended to take large bites from his arm. This is so good. Yum, yum, yum. Give me more. Manny giggled. Taylor took his other arm and pretended to take a bite. Ew, what is that? It tastes like worms. Yuck. Manny looked closely at his arm. Does not. It tastes like sugar. Mommy says so. Eric's phone buzzed, and he took it out and read the text, and he looked up, his eyes moist. "Dad," Ricky said softly, "is everything okay?" Eric nodded. "It seems our prayers have been answered. This is a text from Justin. After having met with the judge this morning and given him the indisputable DNA evidence from the trash sample that Nate is our child, the judge has issued a court order to collect clean DNA from Nate and also another court order awarding us temporary custody of our son." "Why temporary?" Shelley asked. "Because Sandra Norton must be given the opportunity to present her side of things in court. However, Justin has actually spoken with Sandra Norton, and she may not even dispute our claim, which means we might be able to have another child with us much sooner than we thought." Shelley gasped. "I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. There has to be some arrangements made to help this woman get on her feet and get the help she needs." "You're going to have to pay her off?" Cam asked. Eric shook his head. "You all know that we would never do that. We won't exchange money for Nate. That would be like paying a ransom, and we absolutely cannot do that. Paying a ransom would actually put every single member of our family in jeopardy. We will not ever pay a ransom, ever. However, I left it up to Justin's discretion to see how the woman needed help. When God places someone in front of us, we don't simply turn our backs. This woman, Sandra, she made a mistake as a teenager. She almost died from a drug overdose. She now has a brain disability, supposedly. We'll check into that. She'll need some counseling and some guidance and direction on where to take her life, rather than using my child as a circus act to make her money on YouTube. Justin has received a court order to have the child removed from the home and turned over to us. He's spoken with the woman. He's let her know that we won't leave her to fend for herself. We will help her to get on her feet and become self-sufficient. We'll just have to see if she's willing to do the work to help herself. But we won't wait for her to get her life together in order to get our child," Shelley asked, "right?" Eric smiled at his wife and took her hand. "No, Shelley girl, we won't wait. We may have him in our custody as early as tomorrow, or maybe the next day." Eric looked up at Jordan. "And all this is possible because Jordan happened to see a video of Nate and was aware enough to realize how much he looked like these guys. Thank you, Jordan, for being so in tune that you thought to mention it to young Eric." "It was really just an accident," she said softly. Eric shook his head. "No, it was no accident. We can't just dismiss God's work in our lives as an accident or a coincidence. If we do, he'll stop showing up. We acknowledge it, and we give gratitude to both him and to the person he's working through, and that was you, Jordan. You're a special young lady. Thank you for helping us to find our lost child." She smiled. "I'm glad I could help." Ricky shook his head. He had concerns. "Dad, I'm thinking that as soon as this woman gets a lawyer, they'll advise her to fight for custody, or if not for custody, then for a big settlement. They'll see dollar signs. They might ask you to maybe, pay for her time raising the boy, for her time invested with him, something like that." Eric nodded. "Yeah, that's a possibility." "Let them bring suit. At least it will be a legal ransom. But I have to say, with Justin and your brother Mark on our side in court, it won't be a fair fight. They would have as much to lose as to win, and Justin will explain that to Sandra Norton and her legal counsel, and then we'll see just how it turns out. Either way, we get immediate custody of my son." Ricky nodded. "Mom, do you have a bed for Nate?" Bree asked. "Oh, no, I need to get a bed. 5 children, 1 room. That may be a little much. Maybe we should move Angelina to her own room and—" "I don't want to move. I want to stay with my brothers," Angelina cried suddenly. Shelley turned to Eric. "What do we do?" He sighed. "It's too traumatic for her right now to be separated from her brothers, so we will make do. We'll do 2 sets of bunk beds and let her keep her princess bed. We'll make it work, and then maybe in a year or so she'll feel more secure and want her own room. I'm sure you and Bree can find just the right bunk beds to make the boys happy." "I'm going to get a new brother?" Noah asked. Shelley nodded. "Remember how we told you that the monster took you from us when you were very, very tiny?" Yes. Well, we found out that you four weren't the only ones the monster took. There was another. His name was Nate. But the monster didn't like Nate and sent him away to live with someone else. But Nate is your brother, and we finally found him, and hopefully we'll be able to bring him home soon. And he probably is going to feel very out of place at first. Remember when you finally came home to live with us? At first you felt weird, remember? Yes, 'cause we didn't know you very much, but now we know you're our real mommy, Angelina said. That's right. And so when Nate comes home, he's going to feel extra weird because he'll be in a new place and he doesn't know me or Daddy or any of you. But I know you can help him by being very kind to him and welcoming to him. Noah nodded. I can. Me too, Manny said. Me too, Abraham said. I will love him, Angelina said. Jordan looked up at 3 with a smile. He took her hand and squeezed it lovingly. Mom, Jeffy began, I've watched the videos. This kid is definitely genius level. Hopefully I can help him adjust. I'm just saying there is a possibility that he may be resistant to this change because of his intellect, and I may have to do a little mind probing to help him adjust. Shelley nodded. Of course. Whatever you can do to help him adjust will be much appreciated. If he's like you, even close to you, he's going to need a lot of help. I'm going to take that as a compliment. Everyone laughed. That is the end of chapter 13.